Alrighty guys, and welcome back to another episode of Minecraft. However, we are not inside of the realm in today's episode, nor is it part of our realm series. This series is going to be sort of a series of tips and tricks and tutorials for different things that I do. So in today's episode, we're going to be basically focusing on how I build, more or less, my sort of techniques that I do. This is actually the second time I've recorded this episode because the first time my mic decided to stop working for a whole 18 minutes of that recording. Which is probably fine because the last recording was a little bit fluffy. Still irritating though. I digress. That's alright. That means that we get to make it even better this time around. Anywho, some of you guys will probably recognize this because it's our YouTube background. This is the Imperial Palace. I plan on building this on the realm eventually. This is all I really have for it, along with a couple floor plans and stuff. But anywho, so my building style is sort of a grid-like pattern. So you probably look at this and you think it's complicated, or maybe you don't. Maybe you can see the grid pattern already. It doesn't really matter. But anywho, so we'll go ahead and start off with that first. So as you can see here, all of these windows are essentially the same, and I usually like to do that, have them all look exactly the same. Makes it feel a little bit more uniform and stuff, but they don't have to be. As you can see, this is the same window, but its surrounding is what's different on each story, just to make it look visually interesting and slightly different. As well as all those windows are slightly smaller compared to the rest of the stories to make it feel like it's grander and taller, essentially. But it really doesn't work, but it more or less is just visual interest added to it. And we'll go over the grid locking system in a little bit. We might go over that floor plan, but let's go ahead and start off with some basics. Okay, so essentially what I usually do, I'm gonna go and grab some blocks, is we have the rule of three. Now the rule of three is essentially, or at least the rule of three or the rule of 5, 7, 9, anything like that. So as you can see, it's sort of 1, 2, 3 for the main facade of the palace. That's one example of the rule of three. For it would be more or less this as that rule of three, where it's sort of one is in the top, one is taller in the middle, and then the two match on the side. Or it could even be something like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You know, so it just sort of depends on what kind of build you're doing, and you'll have the rule of three adapt to that. But anywho, because I always think this is typically what we do. So like the village of Havenwood follows this, villager houses follow this, the Tregorian mansion follows this, with the rule of three, with there being the central area being the tallest, and then followed by the right being the second tallest, or the left being the second tallest, and then vice versa. One of them will be slightly shorter, as you can see here. Then something else you can do is you can just plop another one inside the foreground, just to create a sort of wavy effect almost within the build, as it sort of creates more visual interest. Oh my gosh, that one's not done too. Wow, that's crazy. All three of those aren't finished. Wow. That's crazy. Anywho. And then you'll also hear me refer to things such as 1 by 3, 1 by 2, that type of thing. This, for example, would be a 2 by 1 block. So imagine this blown up a little bit. So say this block here is one window, so like that one window there is right here. So it'd be one window, and then another window, and that would classify a 2 by 1. This one would be like a 3 by 1. And that's sort of how I refer to the buildings. We'll go over that a little bit later on when we give a little bit of a tour of this world. And another thing, this is sort of odd to me, and this is even, you know, even because there's 2 blocks, odd because there's 3. All of my buildings, as you can see here, end in 1. It's just, I like to have that nice crisp point at the very top of them once we get up to it. It's just really nice in my opinion, and the flagpole is nice and straight. But without any further ado, we'll go ahead and go over this sort of, no, we'll go over the foundation for a building that you guys should be able to recognize. As you can see, here is sort of everything we have on our realm. It's just right here. We have the main design for the Tregorian mansion. As you can see, what I tend to do when I'm designing is I'll design like a wall or something, just like the palace on the other side. I design a wall or a facade just to see how it sort of feels, how it works together. And then once I have that nailed down, I pretty much just go ahead and make the foundation or the layout, because essentially I figure if that looks good and fits pretty well, then building this in survival mode will be essentially, or it should be easier. So anyhow, this is how I do the foundation. So as you can see here, we have the room for the windows and stuff all lined up, and then I have the curtains on the inside usually, just to sort of help it make sense. And this, for example, right here, say if this, what did I just do? Say if this was a building here, it'd be at 1 by 1. Or we'll go off of the green drawing room, for instance. As you can see, it's window. Fireplace is technically taking the spot of a window, but we would count it as a window anyway. So it'd be window, 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 window. It would be a 3 by 2. And then, let's see, all of these are older versions for the Havenwood Village houses. It would be essentially a 1 by 1, because it has one window here. This would be considered 1, even though it's technically 2, which is a little confusing. And yeah, that's just sort of how I do it. So if you ever hear me refer to it being like the 1 by 1s or like the 2 by 3s and stuff like that, that's what I refer to. We'll have a video dedicated to the fireplaces and interior things inside of its own episode. But also, once I sort of finish the rough idea of what it looks like, then I move into sort of the interior to see how it'll look. So as you can see, this is pretty much an exact replica of the library. I think the bookcase is a little bit bigger on the one on the realm. There's no moose head, just the furniture's different, color's different, little stuff like that. But this is where I've sort of been testing out colors for all the different rooms. Like we're going to have an orange and cyan room inside of the upstairs room, or one of the attic bedrooms. So yeah, this is just sort of a little test for the interior, just to make sure it all will be able to actually work really well. Here was where I tested where the gable roofs would line up. This is sort of a godsend with how thin that corridor is that connects the 3 wings of the building. So that is definitely crucial right there. That's a sneak peek for a castle coming up. Here's some furniture. Here's our original Christmas tree that I forgot to take a test image of. I gotta say, I do like our Christmas tree, but this one's a little bit bigger, so we might put that one in a future house or somewhere. This is the test design for the organ. Let me go ahead and make it day so you guys can see what it is we're doing. This was a test for the blue drawing room. This was a test for an old bed. This hasn't been used yet, I don't think. As you can see, this is actually St. Hawthorne's Hospital, what it was originally supposed to look like anyway. As you can see, we have our wings here. It was going to be a little bit of a different layout compared to what we have now. But essentially, if we look at its foundation, you can see a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is a 2 by 3 building. It's probably the biggest of all of the villager buildings. That's just what it's sort of classified as. Now, I won't talk about Havenwood Hall just yet because it technically doesn't exist. Oh shoot, I didn't even realize I have my render distance way up too. Well, we'll be fine. If we crash, we crashed. Speaking of crashing, my computer, I tell y'all what. Yeah, first time, I don't know, I think the USB ports or something are starting to go out. Because, like, my mic has been dying like crazy. And it's a pretty good mic. Never had any troubles with it in the past. It's just, I don't even know. But yeah. So like I said, inside of next Wednesday's episode, we'll probably be going over the actual buildings and stuff that are inside of Havenwood. So the sort of Tudor Gothic style is what we'll probably call it, and do a little bit more in-depth stuff with it. And then after that, we can do things like furniture and stuff like that. We can do a better tutorial for the Tregorian Manor and stuff, but I wanted to give you guys the basics of it with the grid system and how it works, and how we can essentially break down buildings like the palace into more digestible amounts, because, you know, my friends always would look at like a building like this and think that it's just so complicated. And the truth is, and that's sort of the smoke and mirror of the grid system, is for it to look so big and imposing and grand. But really, when you start peeling back its layers and you start to identify the rhythms and the patterns of it, it all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can see how they did that. So for example, this building here, these two towers, or jutty out bits, are exactly the same size as this one. But since this one was in the middle, and it's been given a little bit more prominence with the double grand staircase going up and the flagpole, it gives it the illusion that it's bigger. That, and it's also coming out at you a little bit more. But it's the little variations like that that change it up. Another thing I like to do is I always like to add in these pillars that sort of go all the way down and follow all the way up. It just sort of helps that pattern keep going. So like, for example, you can look at this, which that is kind of crazy. I looked at that for the first time and I actually saw the Tregorian Manor, because these windows are the exact same, but they're different blocks. So, I don't know. Let me know if you could tell that they were the exact same window, same shape and stuff, but just different blocks, different layers of depth and stuff added to them. But anyway, I digress. So essentially, let's take a look at this pattern here. We have a small window up top, a big window at the bottom, and then another, or midsection, and then another window at the bottom. Now what that does is it gives it the illusion, like I mentioned earlier on, that the top window is smaller, as well as just visual interest. But what we did here is we have the windows all being the exact same style, but varying in lengths. This one is surrounded in essentially a square with some crenellations up top, then gold trim. The trim is always very, very important. And then on the second story, we have it start up from the trim with no crenellations underneath of it. And then we have sort of an arch design, a double arch design, with I think a real roof on it too. Yeah, real roof. And then on top of that, we have then the third and final story, which is a crenellation design for the window that sort of juts out for it to support it. Because you can't really just have that start from the arch. You can in some instances. Here, I didn't choose to do that. But yeah, so essentially you take this pattern here, and you can do it either that way for the pattern or this way. I think it makes more sense for us to do that way. So boom, boom, boom. The ground floor all the way up to the third story or second story, depending on where you're from. And then just copying that over so that once it's all together, it looks really big and complicated. But then you sort of slice it down and it becomes easier to digest. And it's pretty much the same principle with the towers of doing it like that. So really, once you nail your window design and stuff, they can carry the build and help it do exactly what it needs to do. But anywho, so like I was saying earlier, the pillars, so the trim of the build is really, I think, what sells it. And that's what all of these white pillars are doing. They're essentially, one, letting the pattern show, but also making it look like it's been decorated and supported. And that's what these arches are doing, it just to give it visual interest and stuff. And then of course you finally have the sort of, I guess you could call it like a crown molding or like a trim or edging or something. I kind of tend to call it the crown because it sort of then encapsulates the entire building and divides the roof from the walls. And that's how I do all my roofs. I cannot do a roof without edging. I mean, I can. Oh, that sounds really bad. Okay, I can make a good roof without any of the trim and stuff. That's better. But in my opinion, it just looks nicer when it has that nice pretty trim and stuff that defines it. It sort of doesn't get lost in it, you know, because imagine if that trim wasn't there and that trim wasn't there and that trim wasn't there. It would all just sort of look like a mushy bit of deep slate. Whereas with this, you get those nice crisp lines. As crisp of lines as we can get in Minecraft, of course. But anywho, and then I always like to add in the top of it, as I feel like when you don't have top, again, it just feels like a hump of rocks on top of it. And then I always like to add in a little spiky bit, because I don't know, I like it. And it's something I've been doing for like the last 1 to 2 years, and I'm sold on it. Excuse me. So yeah, I really am pleased with that. I can go ahead and give you guys a... Oh, okay. Actually, before we do that, sorry, this feels a little bit more all over the place, because now it's like I'm trying to think of what I did in the last one that like should have been brought in. Anywho, oh, I'm sorry, I hit the mic. So for example, the palace. This palace is 19 window lengths long for just this portion, which is crazy, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Yeah, 19 window lengths for this. So technically, you would call this portion of the build 19 by 1, because it's just that portion. Here, however, is a quarter of the palace's actual footprint. So what we're going to do is we're going to count it up. So this portion here we know is 19. So we're just going to add this. So 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. And I always count the side bits because that is part of its footprint. So like right there, since that is a full length window length, we count that. However, we do not count like the one block because that's just, why would you count it? So it was what? 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. So this whole front of the palace is going to be 28 by, and we're going to count it this way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So 11, 23. So it's a 28 by 23 palace, which is crazy. And this is honestly how every single design of mine usually starts, where we do its layout, right? So I haven't put the windows in or anything like that, but I count how much space the window will take up. In this case, I think it's 9 or something. Yeah, 9. So we do 9 blocks, pillar block, 9 blocks, pillar block. And like I said before, it adds structure to it, and it sort of helps you not make a mistake. And, you know, have it all be there and inside of the right spot. Once we're sort of done with this stage, so imagine we have the other 3/4 of the palace floor plan here, we would then go through and start adding in the rooms. So for example, this to me just feels like it's a good room, a nice big corner-sized room. So we would put a room there. We'd have a room right here. We'll obviously have a nice big like gallery room or something right here. So we'd go ahead and just take our green terracotta and build it all the way along here. And just sort of dividing it up so that way we can figure out where the internal courtyards are going to be. I want to say this palace is going to have like 2 to 3 at the very least, which is crazy, of course. Now they're going to realistically probably be able to hold... hold on, let me think about this. They'd probably be able to hold at least 3 St. Hawthorne's hospitals inside of it. It's like boom, boom, boom for its internal courtyard. But as you can see, it just sort of helps to start dividing up those rooms. And then once you get done with that stage, you can start naming the rooms and thinking about what rooms would sort of have to be next to each other. We go ahead and make it day. There we go. And then you sort of can get to more like this sort of plan. This was a house design I was... I like to design houses for like in real life and stuff too, just to, like screw around, you know? So I sort of named these rooms, like this is a tavern room, so where the drinks would be served. This is sort of a ballroom. I don't think this room had a use, but this would be like an internal hall, so it's grand staircase and glass ceiling, how bougie. And then this was going to be like a conservatory. This is like a grand drawing room or whatever. So anyway, you just sort of start naming all of the rooms to figure out what rooms would sort of look best in what position. And that's sort of just like how I approach things and stuff. And if you guys have any questions at all about any of this, feel free to ask them in the comments below. I try to answer every comment best I can to my knowledge. And if it's something I can't address in a comment, then it'll just get its own video where I'll try to explain a little bit better about it. Because if you guys give me a goal in mind, then I can probably explain it a whole lot better. But when it's up to me, it's going to be a little bit all over the place. Yeah, I think in another episode we'll probably do a little bit more of a tour of this world. But yeah, without any further ado, I hope that this video sort of gave some insight into how I do things, and I hope it's going to help for the next couple of episodes that we'll have, where I sort of go in depth on different builds and how we've done it. Like I said, next Wednesday's video is going to be about the village of Havenwood. Really, we're just going to go over a handful of the aspects of the buildings and probably do like a 1x1 or something, or a 1x2. Because once you see one building from the village of Havenwood being built and designed, and once you have the ideas of it, you've done them all, pretty much. They all share such similar characteristics and windows and roofs that it's like they all are different, but they're the same in how they were approached and built. But anywho, I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode of Minecraft. If you did, feel free to hit the like and subscribe button, and I will see you all inside of the next one. See ya.